The rumours that it's a troll, just somebody exposing the sort of the clown world circus of gender ideology. When those rumours came out, all the lefties on Twitter who'd been supporting this person suddenly said, oh no, this is unacceptable. But they were happy to support this person when they thought it was just a man acting out some sort of sexual fantasy in front of children.
Exactly.
That was OK.
So if it is a I mean, I do think if it is a troll, then this makes a point really brilliantly, because you did have the head of the school standing up and saying, you know, we completely support expressions of gender identity, even if it's to the point of fetish.
Did she know that it was that this teacher was trolling?
No, but we don't know for sure. As I've emphasised, this is just rumours. We don't know.
It's impossible to tell anymore.
But it doesn't it tell you something that the fact that I can't tell whether this is a joke or whether this is real suggests something about the world that we now inhabit when it comes to these cultural issues.
I think it's worse than that. I mean, I saw those images. They put a number of images of him up there, and I thought it was one of those questions: do you see pink or do you see grey?
So that's what you saw.
That's what I saw. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like the dress. Is the dress yellow or blue?
Is the dress yellow or is it red?
I can't believe an image like that, and that's what you go to, the colour scheme.
The colours.
I mean, there are other things to look at in that image.
I was also thinking she was operating like this, you know, this bandsaw, which was quite dangerous, and the nipples could have broken the
They're not real nipples.
You know what? I didn't say
maybe it's protective padding.
I say they could have broken the machine. If you listen to what I'm saying, you don't listen to me, Ian.
I sometimes listen to you. I zone out.
And they breaking the machine.
Well, look, here's the thing, right? So, but look, if it is a troll, I have to point this out that this was actually quite literally the plot of a South Park episode about 10 years ago, where the teacher, what's his name, Mr. Garrison, decides to come in with his leather-clad boyfriend and wear explicit fetish gear because he wants to be fired and then sue the school for discrimination. That's the exact plot.
There was something even earlier than that in MASH, the American TV show in the 1970s, where this corporate clinger was pretending to be gay or saying he was gay.
Transvestite. He was dressing as a woman.
Just as a woman,
But it was not gay, ever. But, yeah, you're right. He was trying to get discharged from the army.
Yes.
So maybe... I mean, it does feel like fiction, this kind of thing.
Well...
What do you think, Leo? Is this real or is it not?
Well, the rumour, who's apparently a student at the school, says that this is a teacher who was in trouble for toxic masculinity and not adhering to the woke culture of the school. So, in revenge, has decided to come in with massive... fake breasts like Gaza on a night out in 1987, and you know, to wind up and sort of show the ridiculousness and get fired.
Interesting hypothesis, but of course we don't know because the claim in of itself might be a hoax.
Yeah.
As in the claim that
it was just a post on the internet.
It was just a post on the internet, so we can't really trust that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is completely real, because, you know, I think that we've reached that point when it comes to the self-identity.
Yeah.
That you know, people like Stonewall, groups like Stonewall, have incorporated gender dysphoria and genuine cases of people feeling they're in the wrong body. They've conflated it with fetish, autogynephilia and you know, that kind of transvestism.
And according to the logic of gender ideology, yes, this is a woman, and we must affirm her. And anybody who doesn't affirm her is a transphobe and a bigot and must have their PayPal access removed.
But another the great American comedian Will Franken did a very similar thing where he dressed as a few years back. He dressed as a woman for 7 months for his Edinburgh show, to bring a show up to Edinburgh. And then, like, right afterwards, he says, "I'm not a woman anymore."
Well, but that's the point of this stuff, is you can just decide whether you're a woman or not, and you don't need to go through any kind of gender reassignment process necessarily. And in this case, you just have to put on massive prosthetic bosoms.
It's obviously a thing.
You think it's a joke?
It's obviously a thing, because no one jumps to huge boobs like that. You start with something small. You know, I know what I've done.
What you would do. You've thought about this, haven't you?
I mean, eventually you don't get enough attention. You get a little attention, a little more attention. And as us comedians, I want the attention.
Of course. Well, look, let's move on now. We've got another question here from Edward. Edward, hello.
Hi. Has this week's mini-budget put the Tory MPs in the red wall at risk?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. This is the mini-budget, and the Chancellor has unveiled this £45 billion worth of tax cuts. He unveiled this on Friday. Cut income tax for people earning over £150,000 and also scrapped a cap on bankers' bonuses. And the Resolution Foundation says households in London and South East England will gain 3 times as much as those in the north from tax cuts next year. Lots of chat about this mini budget. Do you think it's a good thing, Leo?
The way people are framing it, it's like saying households are going to gain. They're not gaining, they're just having less stolen from them by the government.
Well, that's the libertarian view. But do you think that this will actually have any tangible effects?
We pay more tax in this country than they do in Norway, and I think that's ridiculous. I think in Norway they should reduce their taxes as well. I think this could affect the government's chances in the election because obviously the sort of red wall, is a sort of lower economic bracket. But I think it's wrong to sort of assume that everybody in the red wall is low income and on benefits and just wants government handouts. That's totally not true.
Yeah, but
people there are strivers or workers, and they'll appreciate the tax cut, even if it's less than the tax cut that maybe a banker in Kensington gets. They'll still appreciate the tax cut and the idea behind it.
Yeah, but this is the question, isn't it? Because these tax cuts are clearly going to benefit the rich rather than the poor in the short term. I mean, the idea of Truss is it's about economic growth. She believes that she can grow the economy by these kind of tax cuts.
Yeah, but can't the people paying for the party have some of the punch at the party? You know, we're saying wealthy people, and this is, bear in mind, this isn't a wealth tax. This is an income tax. This is a tax. This is tax cuts on workers.
Yes.
So in that respect, it's pretty progressive.
Yes.
So this is anybody who's working and earning money is going to feel they're going to see their pay increase.
But how are they going to pay for these tax cuts? Borrowing. Right?
They're not paying for the tax cuts. Tax cuts are free. They're paying for all the nonsense that the tax would have been spent on. Such as equality, diversity and inclusion departments. Why do we need them?
They are expensive.
Why does Haringey Council need a policy department? I mean, why? There's so much waste and profligacy in the public sector.
Is this the issue, Lewis? Bureaucracy, really? And we just need to find a better way to regulate things and manage things better?
Well, I mean, in the end run, you need to.
Yeah.
If they're going, I don't know whether they're going to cut the expenses to match the $45 billion that they're saving.
Yeah.
But this is not the time to cut money coming into the government. They've spent so much money as it is.
Can I just ask, though, are tax cuts really the route to economic growth? Or is there something we should be... I mean, is it the case that we, as, the fifth biggest economy in the world, somehow we're not able to withstand a war overseas, a pandemic, these kind of things? Isn't it not the case that actually our economy has been much weaker than we have supposed for quite a long time?
No, it's the
other way around,
hasn't it? It's the other way around with your question, which is, what was your question?
Well, you didn't even listen to it.
I did listen to it, but then you kept on going.
The problem is that our economy is not growing. We're not. We've got very low productivity, and we're not growing at a great extent.
Right, so
our
that's what I'm
target's
saying.
like 2.5%.
So is not the case to forget about this kind of short-termism that so many of these politicians seem to be embracing because they're thinking about the next electoral cycle? Why don't we think about doing something with infrastructure, with domestic?
This isn't short-termism. This is the opposite of short-termism. Yeah. I agree with Leo on this. The purpose of this is to make this country more attractive to super rich people so that they move here and they might want to put a factory in the country.
Yeah.
If rich people don't want to come...
Is that going to work?
Because basically the only thing that moves this world is where rich people want to live and go visit and put their factories. And if they don't want to,
but it never happens that way, does it? When they say, "Oh, we're going to increase the taxes for the corporate tax or for the super rich," and people say, "Oh, well, they're going to just go to another country," and they never do.
Because you don't know any rich people yet.
No, that is true. As
a Jew, I know many rich people, and they are sitting there. They're seeing, where can I move to? I got friends of mine. They're sitting there. What state should I move to? Vermont, or should I move to New Hampshire? You know, they're sitting there.
Okay. Well, I'll try and get some richer friends so I have a more objective stance on this issue. Anyway, our next question now is from John. Where is John? Hello, John.
Hi there. Do the police need to stop wasting time on symbolic gestures?
OK, so now this news broke this week. This is the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the police must focus on common sense policing rather than initiatives on diversity and inclusion, that they must get the basics right. In other words, solve crime rather than dance around to the Macarena in rainbow lanyards. That strikes me as a reasonable approach. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, just some ideas like attending the scenes of crimes.
That would be great.
At the moment, if you've been burgled and you want the police to turn up, you've got to say, and also they misgendered me on the way out the door. That's the only way.
You joke, but it is true that if you say it was an assault or a burglary aggravated by prejudice of some kind that you have perceived, they will take it very, very seriously at that point. But actually, most burglaries, they just close the case within half an hour.
Yeah.
Because they just think they can't do anything about it.
And we're seeing with the policing of the riots in Leicester between Hindus and Muslims, the police are very afraid, very timid about going in and arresting and being seen to do that because they could be accused of being racist.
Well, that's going back to what happened, of course, with the grooming gang scandal and that kind of thing. I mean, what do you think, Lewis? That I do worry that there has been a politicisation of not just the police, but also the Crown Prosecution Service, also the judiciary. I mean, is this?
I don't think it's politicalisation. I just don't think that they're doing their job. I don't think it matters with all of this stuff. It's like when you find out that the chance of you getting put in jail for burglary is 4%, and the chance of you being put in jail for stealing a car is only 1%.
Yeah.
1 out of 100.
That is
chance.
bad. Yeah.
That's
but Lewis, they
why
do.
Why are we buying cars?
Yeah. Why would you burgle something? Because you think, you know what, I can steal
Lewis,
the car and get
you
away.
say it's not relevant, but it kind of is relevant. Even just on the basic level of PR, when people see the police tweeting out saying, "We're going to be investigating you for non-crime. Make sure you don't tweet anything nasty, or we're going to be knocking on your door." People can see this is a waste of time. They're recording thousands and thousands of non-crime hate incidents every year, which
everything you talk about, you're always in the nitty-gritty. You're not in the main thing. If people wouldn't care if they had a crime against them and it was prosecuted, but the only reason they care is because it's not prosecuted and they're sitting there worrying about someone's tweet.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's move on now. We've got a question. This from Francesca. Francesca. Hello.
Hi. My question is the Dilbert comics racist?
So this was a news story, and you'll know the Dilbert comics, very famous, the guy with the glasses, sort of triangular head. And 77 newspapers in the United States have stopped running this sort of iconic comic strip after the creator started running these sort of anti-woke stories. So one recent comic strip included a black employee who identifies as white being asked to also identify as gay. Now, Dilbert, this has been going for ages. It was invented in 1989 by Scott Adams. It's in newspapers in 57 different countries. I wonder if you've got any image. Do you have an image of any of the Dilbert cartoons so people can see what we're talking about? No, I don't think we do. Anyway, Leo, it was a vain hope on my part.
You didn't prepare that. That's the kind of thing that I would do, and not you didn't work on it.
I apologise, Lewis. I should have prepared it before I assumed
so unlike
it was there.
you.
Well, I thought I described him pretty well. I think we know what we're talking about. But look, surely a satirist at this time, a cartoonist satirist, is going to, at some point, delve into these issues, right? Because they're funny.
Yeah.
When you've got a man wearing huge breasts to school, that's funny, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start talking about identity politics as satirists, right?
Yeah, I mean, we see people like South Park who've been mentioned, Rick and Morty, they're sort of animated series that satirise a lot of this stuff. I guess Dilbert's maybe a bit too mainstream. Everybody reads it when they're having their breakfast.
Is that the problem, that it's a sort of thing that's unlike South Park, which is obviously very adult-oriented?
Yes, you can't be too biting if you're just
But I've seen some of these Dilbert cartoons relating to this topic. They're funny, and they're not offensive, and they're not boundary pushing. They're just sort of poking fun at some of the absurdities we can all see.
Yeah, but I guess we don't get to decide what's offensive. If somebody gets offended, that's it. That's offensive.
Or maybe maybe the newspaper wasn't offended. Maybe nobody was offended, but it's like Leo says, they say they're offended in order to get some kind of...
That's probably very likely. When the estate of Dr. Seuss decided that it was no longer going to publish 6 of his books.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone actually complained. I think the public, they just decided, well, this has got some outdated stereotypes, so we'll just withdraw it. And a lot of this stuff happens, I fear, where people are sort of preemptively deciding what people might be offended by.
Yeah.
And that just seems to me a waste of time. Anyway.
And who reads newspapers anyway? I mean...
We do.
You do?
Yeah, you're meant
the only
to.
one.
Lewis, this is a topical show. You're meant to read the newspapers that I recommend. This is your problem in a nutshell. Prepare more.
I think if I prepared more, I'd get it even wronger.
You probably would, that's true. After the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing a controversial inclusive language guide that's been issued by a London borough. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A London borough has caused controversy by misleadingly conflating sex and gender in an inclusive language guide. The Royal Borough of Greenwich has published Language Matters, which it says is designed to help staff communicate with each other in an inclusive way. The document says that under the 2010 Equality Act, it is illegal to discriminate on grounds of gender, and points out that gender is what is in fact referred to as sex in the Act. Now, joining me to discuss this is Caroline Fisk from Women Uniting. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I want to first start by asking you about this, because this story, they actually created this guide. This is the Royal Borough of Greenwich, created this guide back in April. It didn't really make news much, you know, and it's been resurfacing on social media at the moment, because now it's being distributed to parents and teachers, and that's how you came to find it.
Yes. So I was just on Twitter, as we spend too much time on Twitter these days, don't we? And I just saw something which I thought was extraordinary, that a parent said, my school has just sent me this, and, you know, here was this clip. And, it was gender ideology.
Yeah.
And, it might have been something about, non-binary, pansexual, asexual, LGBTQIA+. I just thought, hang on a second, we've now got schools, and it was Thomas Tallis School in Greenwich, sending this material out to parents.
And let's be clear, some of the document in of itself is doing things like saying you should avoid gender-specific pronouns. They actually list words such as he, her, his as words to be avoided.
Yeah, so I asked this person, could you send me this document? And when I saw it, I thought it was so extraordinary.
Yeah.
It seemed to go beyond so many things we've seen. It has the usual things like, don't say women get pregnant, say, people get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that that's now par for the course is extraordinary.
Yeah.
But then I saw, don't say he, him. And I'm kind of like,
how do you speak English without using these words?
So such an extreme document was just under the radar and now being sent by schools out to parents. Something else which I thought was completely extraordinary, it said, don't say same-sex parents.
Yes.
Say LGBTQIA+ parents.
Right.
And I'm kind of like, oh my God, this is the erasure of same-sex attraction. We can't refer to it.
Yes.
And that took me back to the court case last week with LGB Alliance, where, there was this implication that you can't refer to same-sex attraction.
Yes.
Or that these old words like lesbian, they actually mean something different now. And I thought, oh my God, this is really, really pushing against same-sex attraction.
It's very serious, because this is going to schools, right?
Yeah.
And there will be gay kids, or kids who will turn out to be gay, or kids who are struggling with their sexuality. And all of a sudden they're told that being attracted to someone of the same sex it's not really a thing.
Well, to be told to say into your ordinary language, don't say same-sex, say LGBTQIA+. This is really quite extreme.
Yes.
And as you say, it kind of just erases people, and particularly children just discovering their sexuality.
Yes.
So I can't refer to who and how I am.
And it's troubling,
I can't
isn't
talk
it?
about
but,
it.
But I think the very fact that this didn't get much coverage when this document was published in April, and I wonder whether it's because people will have seen that. I think it did appear in the Telegraph or something like that. And I think people would have seen that and thought, well, it doesn't matter. It's one of these lunatic documents which has been created by some quango, and no one's going to take it seriously. Well, here we are a few months later, and it is being distributed to parents within schools. So that's where it matters, doesn't it? Because now,
that's right.
You know,
so I agree.
means something.
We're used to the stories. You know, look at the sort of lunacy coming from Stonewall.
Yeah.
And then it's gone out to a local council. OK, yeah, we've had those stories. Hang on a second. We now see it going to schools. Now the schools are pushing it out to parents.
Yes.
So insidious and you know, hard to stop, particularly if the local authority is in that chain.
Yes.
So if a parent wanted to complain, they might think, well, I'll complain to the local authority in the first instance.
Yes.
Hang on, this came from the local authority.
Yeah. So what do you do then?
Really
I mean, so this is
pretty insidious.
This is Greenwich. I mean, I wonder to what extent the government is even aware that these kind of materials are being produced and disseminated.
Well, you know, when you gave your list at the start of the show of all these organisations which are sort of backing all these sort of woke ideologies, you left out of the list local authorities.
Yeah.
I think people tend to think, well, you know, a bit boring, but they oversee so many of our services.
They do.
And that brings me on to the other bit, which, you know, I was just sort of staggered by. They boldly stated that when the Royal Borough of Greenwich, when they're interpreting the Equality Act, they won't make reference to sex, which is a protected characteristic in the law.
Yes.
They will interpret that as gender.
It's actually worse than interpretation because in the document itself, which I read and you very kindly forwarded to me, it says one of the protected characteristics is gender or gender identity, and then it says, in brackets, what the Equality Act calls sex.
Yeah.
In other words, it is explicitly misrepresenting the law in order to push an ideological viewpoint.
Yeah.
How can that be something that a local authority is doing and distributing in schools, and how is it being so blindly accepted? Because that is going to get people in a lot of trouble if they think the law is one way and it's actually something very different.
Well, absolutely. But for me, the really critical thing here is, so right across Greenwich, let's say women are looking for protection of their single-sex spaces and services, and let's say, for example, they want a women-only swimming session, or they have some concerns at the local hospital, you know, about single-sex wards, or an elderly woman wants a female carer.
Yes.
And they're sort of approaching the local authority, understanding the Equality Act. We have a right to single-sex services, single-sex spaces. And hang on a second, the local authority will push back and say, no, our interpretation is that they are single gender. Well, hang on a second, there's a trans-identifying male coming into our, you know, single-sex swimming session. We want some protection here. The local authority, no, we interpret that as single gender. I mean, it completely erodes what should be a protection in law for women.
Yes.
Well, it's coming from the local authority. Women don't have many other places to turn. And so that's really concerning. When an authority, which is meant to protect the law, explicitly, openly states its intention to undermine the law.
And this has been something that has been promulgated by Stonewall a great deal. And I remember when there was the case of Jo Phoenix at the University of Leicester, and her invitation was rescinded. And this was on the basis of advice from Stonewall. And the lawyer, Akra Reindorf, pointed out that what was happening here is that, that Stonewall were representing the law as they would like it to be and not as it actually is. And it sounds very much like the Royal Borough of Greenwich are doing the same thing here.
Yeah.
And we can't have that, can we? We can't have local authorities blatantly misstating the law and saying you've got to follow our imagined version of the law. I mean, because isn't that going to just store up all kinds of trouble for the future?
I mean, as I say, where do people turn when the local authority itself is saying we're going to misrepresent or misinterpret the law?
Yes.
And this is why we're seeing so many court cases.
Yes.
Of just literally plucky individuals having to challenge this. Some people have said to me this is ripe for judicial review, that if an authority which is meant to sort of manage the law and interpret the law correctly is sort of disregarding the law or misinterpreting the law. But, you know, we're in a really bad place when this is how we have to sort of protect ourselves and our laws, which we've fought for,
Can you explain something to me, though? I mean, do we really have to rely on these very brave individuals like Alison Bailey, like Maya Forstater, who are willing to take these things to the court and pursue them to their ends?
Yeah.
Why isn't the government... I mean, the Tory government has been presiding over this stuff for 12 years. It seems to me that some of this has to be top-down, doesn't it? Some of these reforms.
Well, this is what we were waiting for. And so you said I was part of Women Uniting. I'm actually part of Conservatives for Women. And we were set up to say to the Conservative government, where are you on this?
Yeah.
Over 10 years, gender ideology has been pushed out through all of our public institutions. Almost every public institution was a member of Stonewall, Trans Women Are Women. We were seeing the erosion of women's single-sex spaces. So absolutely, where is the Conservative government on this? And I hope in this new reforming era under Liz Truss, we'll finally get some good action on it.
I mean, I'm not suggesting things would be any better under Labour on this particular issue, but it strikes me that for all the accusations that the culture war is something that the Tories have invented and that they're fighting a war on woke, well, if they are, they're not doing a very good job.
They haven't been. We've started to see some pushback. We saw a really great speech from Suella Braverman in August. I know you've got Kevin Lister on later. She very clearly stated that schools, for example, have a right not to use preferred pronouns, not to let boys use the girls' changing rooms, toilets. So we're starting to see some action, but, it's been 10 years. And we absolutely need to see the Tories acting now.
Well, particularly for the children. I mean, there's going to be some young people who are going to be very uncomfortable with a lot of these things that they are being told.
I mean, well, what can I say? You've got Kevin Lister coming on later.
Yes.
Children's safeguarding should be absolutely paramount. And we all know that loads of confused kids, lonely kids, kids searching for an identity are on Twitter, on social media. Sorry, not kids on Twitter, that's us. Everything else.
Yeah.
And pretty much the main thing which they can identify into now is this gender ideology.
Yes.
And, it promises euphoria.
Yeah.
And a group and community and engagement, and you're courageous and you're brave. Absolutely essential that us adults push back and say that sex is real and you should feel comfortable in your own body and find your own identity, which is unique and not based on sort of really regressive stereotypes.
Caroline Fisk, thanks very much for joining me.
Well, thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be talking about the protests in Iran which broke out after the death of a woman who was arrested for breaking hijab laws. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later on in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Lewis Schaefer and Leo Kurtz. And we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So come on, don't be shy. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our level best to answer your personal problems. The Iranian president has promised to deal decisively with protesters following the death in custody of a woman detained by the country's morality police. Mahsa Amini was held for allegedly violating the Islamic dress code for women by failing to wear a hijab. Women have been burning their hijabs during the protests, which the president has described as a riot that threatens Iran's security and peace. Iran's state television said yesterday that at least 41 people have been killed in the last week. I'm joined now by the human rights activist Yasmin Mohammed. Yasmin, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
Yasmin, I want to ask you about the women who are protesting against the morality police and their various strictures. This is the kind of courage that we don't normally see. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. But why are we not hearing more from the intersectional feminists here in the West?
That's a really great question, and I wish I had the answer to that. That's a question that I've been asking for years and years. In fact, that was the subtitle of my book, How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. I've been frustrated for a very long time, as have been all of the Iranian activists, the women that have been screaming about this for years and years. We've been very frustrated to see that we have been saying that women are forced into this religious, misogynist clothing under threat of violence, imprisonment, and even death. And here in the West, people are taking these articles of clothing as if they are just benign fashion statements, putting them on the cover of magazines, putting little children in them, selling them in Lululemon and Nike, and ignoring the fact that these women are dying. It is heartless, it is cruel, it is a betrayal of feminism. It's heartbreaking, it's infuriating. And, you know, I'm really glad that you're having me to talk about this today on your show, but it's so sad that it had to take a young girl being beaten to death until she was brain dead before we could finally have this conversation.
Can you give us some sense, I mean, from your background, you will know more than anyone, the extent of these kind of restrictions against women in these Islamic states? What kind of thing are we dealing with here?
Well, you're dealing with it from the very beginning. So if we're talking about Iran, for example, girls can't even go to school unless they wear hijab, unless they wear this, you know, this dress code that is imposed on them. So if they want to get an education, they're going to have to wear this hijab. You're seeing similar things, you know, in Afghanistan, where girls are being restricted from their education. Also, it's down to their dress code. In Saudi Arabia, we had 15 girls that were burned to death in a school because they weren't wearing hijab properly, so the firefighters couldn't go in there to save them. I mean, the stories are endless, Andrew. The stories are heartbreaking. You know, it's I don't know what to tell you. The hijab is used as this, you know, it's almost like handcuffs that are put on women, that they must accept that they are lesser than, they must accept that they are, you know, to be subjugated. And if a woman takes off the hijab and says, no, I choose what goes on my own body, I refuse to wear this clothing that you're forcing on me, then they'd rather see her dead. They'd rather see a woman dead than see her standing up for herself like that.
Is it just the case that people in Western countries don't really understand what's going on? I mean, I suppose if you choose as a woman in the West to wear a hijab, you might say, well, that's my choice. And this is, I mean, I've seen some women claim that it's a symbol of empowerment. But in the context of a strict theocratic Islamic regime, it has a completely different significance.
Yes, absolutely. The word choice here is a lie. It does not work in this context. When the choice is wear it or suffer the consequences, or you're not allowed to get educated, or you're going to go to prison, or you're going to be killed, then of course women are going to choose to wear it. But You know, this is obviously the situation in Iran is extreme, but I do want to express that you're seeing the same kind of thing all over the world in Muslim majority countries and in Western countries, where girls are still under these same kinds of coercions and threats and violence. In Iran, it's coming from the Islamic Republic, it's coming from the police, just like it's coming from the police in places like Afghanistan. And they also used to have religious police in Saudi Arabia. But the common thread between all of these countries is the religion of Islam. So wherever you find that religion, you can find Muslim people that are extremists and that are going to be forcing this on their daughters. Here in Canada, we had a young girl that was killed over the hijab. I know in the UK, you've had Benaz Mahmoud killed over the hijab. I'm sure there are so many others, all over the world. And, I don't know all of their names, but they're the unknown women that are just, being threatened by honor violence and honor killing over this piece of cloth. And it's been happening for so many years. And then I can't tell you how disheartening it is to hear somebody after that call it a choice. What are our choices when we're being brought up and we're being told, wear this and be a good girl, be a clean girl, or don't wear it and be a dirty, filthy whore that's going to burn in hell for eternity? That's not really a choice.
Is this because, with the rise of intersectional feminism, as opposed to second-wave feminism, these are very different things, that now we have a kind of hierarchy of privilege that is built up to the extent where the fear of being called Islamophobic means that legitimate criticisms of the kind you are making, for instance, are seen as complete anathema?
That's the sad thing, is if this was a Christian theocracy that was forcing, Christian girls to dress in a certain way or was, enforcing, like, there was child marriage, there was polygamy, there was female genital mutilation, there's all the things that we're seeing in under Islamic theocracies or in Islamic communities, then even these intersectional feminists, they would know what to say. Their brains would function in that circumstance. But when it comes to Islam and it comes to Muslims, suddenly they've forgotten everything that they've ever known about feminism or equality or about human rights.
And what about moderate Islamic people, Muslims who want this to change, want to actually do something about it? Am I right in thinking it's not very helpful when Western feminists sort of say, this isn't an issue, what are you talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When Muslim women themselves are around the world, I've had the hashtag Free from Hijab from 2016. And if you scroll through it, you will see women from around the world burning their hijabs for years. We've been doing this. Women in Saudi Arabia are taking off their niqabs and burning them and stepping on them. These kinds of, this kind of bravery has been happening all over the world for a very long time. And then you have people here in the West saying, this is not a problem, these are just choices. What we should be doing is linking hands with the people who are open-minded and who are, trying to progress the religion and who are saying that we no longer want to follow these misogynist edicts in the religion. And there are quite a few of them. But unfortunately, they're not the ones with the money and the influence. They're the ones, we don't get to hear from them. Instead, we're hearing from the Islamists. Instead, we're hearing from the extremists. Instead, we're hearing from the people that continue to tell you this is a choice and this isn't a problem. And it is such a significant problem for Muslim people too, because they've developed this trope that Muslim woman means hijabi, which simply isn't true. And that makes it so much more difficult for Muslim women who are fighting against this, because now not only do they have to fight their own communities, but they have to fight the general Western societies as well.
And finally, Yasmin, could you talk to us a little bit about these protests and whether or not you feel that they will be effective?
I think they will be effective. The Iranian people continue to blow me away with their bravery, their superhuman bravery. I'm very impressed with them, as I'm sure most people are who have watched the protests. I think they've had enough. And, it's been over 40 years, and they really are not going to stop until this Islamic regime is completely decimated. At this point, they're talking about what's next. They're talking about what is going to be the next government. Is it going to be a monarchy? Is it, what are we choosing? The fact that these guys are going to be out of power soon is almost a given.
Well, that's a relatively optimistic note to end on, and I'm grateful for it. Yasmin Mohammed, thank you very much for joining me today. After the break, I'm going to be joined by the head of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, after PayPal closed 3 of his accounts. Don't go away.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio,
and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. PayPal have closed 3 accounts connected to Toby Young, the founder of the Free Speech Union. First to go was Young's personal PayPal account, quickly followed by those of the Free Speech Union and also the Daily Skeptic, which is a website that he runs. PayPal say they took the decision for a violation of their acceptable use policy. Quite a nebulous idea. Toby Young, of course, joins me now. Toby, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.
Can you talk to us a bit about, firstly, before we get into this, what is the Free Speech Union about? Why was it set up and what sort of work have you been doing?
So I set it up in February 2020 to defend people that are targeted for cancellation by outrage mobs, not for saying or doing anything unlawful, but merely for exercising their perfectly lawful right to free speech. So we go to bat for people if they're being placed under investigation by an HR department, if someone's trying to kick them out of university for something they've said, something perfectly lawful. So in addition to that casework, that's about 50% of what we do, and we sometimes go to law, and we have quite an extensive legal team. In addition to that, we also run events. We've got an event with you coming up on Tuesday, a book launch. I'm going to interview you on stage, but we've got events coming up with Neil Oliver, the comedian Jack Dee. We've got a Christmas party at Comedy Unleashed. And we also publish FAQs. So, if members of ours are wondering what they should do if they're asked to declare their preferred gender pronouns in the workplace and they don't want to do that, we can tell them what their rights are and whether they should or not.
And it's a non-partisan thing, isn't it? I mean, you defend people from the left, from the right, everywhere in between.
People often try and portray it as, a right-wing organisation because free speech, as we know, is often caricatured as a right-wing issue. But no, we've defended Chris Williamson, the former Labour MP, Richard Dawkins, the biologist, plenty of left-wing people as well as plenty of right-wing people. About a fifth, if not a quarter of the people that call us and ask for our help at the moment are gender-critical feminists, old-fashioned lefties who've got into trouble for standing up for sex-based women's rights.
And, of course, a lot of the subscriptions for membership of the Free Speech Union come through PayPal. Roughly a third, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, about a third of our roughly 9,500 members are paying their recurring membership dues via PayPal.
And so when did you first hear that PayPal had ditched the account?
It wasn't last Thursday, but the Thursday before, September 15th.
Yeah.
So I got these 3 emails in very quick succession, all claiming that all 3 accounts had violated the acceptable use policy. And, had it been one account that had been found guilty about a particular crime, maybe it would have been plausible. But for all 3 accounts to be found guilty at exactly the same time and closed suggests that there's something else going on in the background.
But it's very unclear what they mean by that. Did they not give you any specifics about in what way had you violated this policy?
No specifics initially, and we called up the customer service agents and they couldn't throw any light on it. I sent an email to the CEO of PayPal UK. He still hasn't replied.
Right.
Got in touch with the corporate affairs department saying I was intending to write something about this. Could they give me a comment, explain why it had happened? They still haven't got back to me. So, no, we really didn't know. I mean, we're really in the dark about exactly why they've done this. They then, in the case of the Daily Sceptic, followed up a few days later to say that we had breached their policy about promoting hate, violence and racial intolerance, which, you'd be hard pushed. I think, give me an example of where we've done that on the Daily Sceptic. It was completely implausible. And then a few days later, they told a newspaper, oh, no, the reason we kicked the Daily Sceptic off our platform is because they traffic in COVID vaccine misinformation. An entirely different allegation. And that's not even a breach of the acceptable use policy. That's a breach of the user agreement. So they can't make up their minds. I think what's going on is they decided to close all 3 accounts for political reasons, and they're now rushing to come up with some kind of rational justification after the event.
Because it's not just your accounts, is it? This has happened to other people as well.
It's happened to lots of other people. There seems to be a purge going on.
And this isn't the first time. We had Patreon before ditching subscribers. We've had YouTube demonetising people. And it does come down to ideological worldview. It does come down to a perspective that they have, and they don't like people who don't share that perspective using their services. But isn't this very, very sinister? Because if we get to the point where people aren't prepared to say, OK, we disagree with your point of view, but we're going to stop you being able to engage in the business of living, the paying bills, this kind of thing. I mean, this is scary stuff.
It's really an escalation in cancel culture. I mean, it's one thing to be kicked off YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You can still live your life.
Yeah,
but if
probably better.
Pretty improve your life.
Yeah.
But if you actually, if you're no longer able to use banking services, then you're in real difficulty. I mean, in China, it's the social credit system. Ideological conformity is enforced. So whereby if you don't toe the party line, you can have banking services withdrawn completely. So you can't even buy groceries in a supermarket. You can't travel from one part of the country to another to see members of your family. I mean, it's a really serious and sinister form of totalitarian control that until now has largely been confined to communist China, but it's now spreading throughout the West, except instead of ideological dogma being enforced by the Communist Party, it's being enforced by capitalist woke corporations.
So where does cancel culture end? Because, it's all very well saying we hate this person's opinions and we want them kicked off Twitter or whatever, but then people are going after people's livelihoods, trying to get them fired. That's part of the typical tactic, and where the Free Speech Union comes in to defend people. Now there are companies saying we don't want you to be able to earn a living anymore or use banking systems. What's the end point? Homelessness? What do they want?
What do they want? I mean, I think what they want, Andrew, is for anyone who dissents from the prevailing orthodoxy that they want to promote and they sign up to, they want them to shut up and to not speak out, because if they do, they're going to suffer these various consequences. I think one of the reasons they've singled me out for this punishment beating is to send a warning to others. If you speak out, if you don't toe the line, this will happen to you too. So it's really important that we fight back, and we are fighting back. There was a letter signed by 42 MPs and peers sent to Jacob Rees-Mogg, the business secretary, yesterday, saying you need to ask the Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulation Authority and the Competition and Markets Authority, the financial regulators, to investigate what's happened here, to ask PayPal what they think they're doing. And if it turns out that this is perfectly within the rules, you need to change the rules to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that may mean amending legislation to put legal safeguards in place so financial services companies based in California can't punish people just for saying something perfectly lawful.
Yes, I saw Fraser Nelson wrote an article about this, saying that we needed to make it illegal to discriminate on the basis of political opinions. Is that, is it the case that it's because PayPal is situated abroad that's the problem.
So the Equality Act does make it unlawful to discriminate against people on the grounds of political belief, broadly speaking. So if PayPal was headquartered in the UK, the Equality Act would apply to PayPal, and I could bring a case for them on the grounds that they discriminated against me for my perfectly lawful political beliefs, which I think are a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. But because they are headquartered, PayPal Europe, headquartered in Luxembourg, and the mothership is in California, there isn't much we can do.
Right. So then what's the next step? I mean, is the government going to put any pressure on these companies, or are they making it worse with their online safety bill?
Well, potentially they might. I mean, the difficulty with the online safety bill is it's telling these big tech companies, you know, you have to not only make sure you don't allow anyone to post something unlawful, but you also have to make sure you don't let them post anything legal but harmful to adults, which is an incredibly nebulous concept. The government's going to fill it out, and they're going to use phrases like misinformation in order to, you know, in the guidance to these social media companies about what they need to remove. Now, you know, they're bad enough as it is. They don't need a nudge. They don't need any encouragement from a Conservative government to be even more censorious than they're already being. So, yeah, that's hopefully the government will strip out the legal but harmful to adult stuff from the online safety bill. But I also think they need to put legislative safeguards in place to stop big tech financial services companies like PayPal from deplatforming people simply for not being sufficiently woke. And actually, it isn't just people on the right of centre who are suffering the ire of these big tech censors. I heard tonight that the Socialist Workers' Party has been demonetised by PayPal. In the US, a couple of left-wing websites that oppose the war in Ukraine, Mint Publishing and Consortium News, they've both been demonetised. So it isn't just people on the right. This concerns everyone. Unless you conform to a very narrow set of acceptable orthodox views, you risk having your banking services withdrawn unless we do something about this now.
So this raises the question, doesn't it? Why are so many left-wing people cheering on multi-billion-dollar corporations to censor on their behalf? And can they not have some kind of foresight to understand that once you empower them to do these kind of things, it might end up hitting you?
Well, I mean, there are so many examples of left-wing people being deplatformed by these big tech companies. You'd think that by now they'd have woken up and smelt the coffee. But I think they're so kind of embroiled in the kind of trenches of the culture war. They think, oh, Toby Young's been deplatformed. Great, we're not going to stick up for him. That's quite right. And you even find now people like James O'Brien it's sounding like members of the Institute of Economic Affairs saying, well, it's their right, isn't it? Right to freedom of association. They don't have to serve you. They're a private company.
Quite a libertarian perspective.
Quite a libertarian perspective. But, you know, Andrew, you know, if PayPal had decided to demonetise me because, you know, because of the colour of my skin or my religious beliefs or my sexual orientation, they'd be absolutely up in arms. What's the difference if they're discriminating against me because of my political beliefs? I mean, they shouldn't be discriminating against customers. My political beliefs should be a matter of complete indifference to the people providing my banking services.
OK, well, good luck with it. I hope you get your services back. Thanks, Toby Young, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Now, Free Speech Nation is on until 9 o'clock, and we are followed by Mark Dolan tonight. And here is what you can expect to see on this evening's show.
On Mark Dolan tonight in our Labour Party conference special. Has Liz Truss's tax-cutting budget gifted Labour the next election? And has Keir Starmer got what it takes to be our next Prime Minister? We'll hear from voices across the political spectrum, including former top minister under Tony Blair, Dennis McShane, and former Tory government minister Anne Widdecombe. And in my big opinion, we don't need a new Prime Minister. We've already got one, and she's off to a cracking start. See you at 9.
It's a few minutes past 8 o'clock. This is Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So we've got a lovely studio audience here. I don't want to see them go to waste. Let's get some more questions. These have all been... Actually, no, we're not going to the audience. We're going to get some emails. We've got an email here from Jordan. Jordan has said, how worried are you by the recent violence in Leicester? Well, The answer is, I'm very worried about this. And you will have seen, probably online, there's been a lot of sort of viral images of this kind of thing. There have been groups of Muslims and Hindus, mostly young people, who've been involved in these violent clashes in Leicester. This has been almost a month now. Some of the images have been particularly spectacular and have gone viral. At least 8 men have been charged. It was reported on Friday that 158 incidents are under investigation by the police at the moment. Leo, is this a failure of multiculturalism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Tony Blair government brought in this idea that we could have multiculturalism, everybody could live in their own ghettoised communities and have faith schools. So right from infancy, people are taught that they're different and that they're, obviously every faith, tells you that you're the sort of best one. So it sort of, entrenches the sort of differences. And also we're importing dramas from other countries.
Well, there's been a lot of comparisons with the clash between Hindus and Muslims to Kashmir. Yeah. And people are talking about, apparently a lot of this started with this cricket match between India and Pakistan. But does it say something that these young people, whoever they might be, appear to identify more with India and Pakistan than they do with Britain?
I mean, they do live in Leicester, so I can understand why they want to identify with someone else, Maybe if they're in a better part of the UK.
How dare you? Gary Lineker is from Leicester. I mean, there's nothing...
Exactly. But I think it is a shame that they sort of, because so many immigrants to the UK really see themselves as British and adopt British. Obviously you keep your own culture, but then you just adopt the sort of British way of just openness and tolerance and understanding that we're in a plurality rather than a sort of, we've got to have everything rigidly one way. So, yes, it's a shame that hasn't worked in Leicester.
Do you think, Lewis, I mean, some people would say that Leo's perspective there is a bit racist because people should completely hold on to their culture.
I was going to wait for somebody to call me that on Twitter. Thanks for getting it.
No. Well, I'm not calling you that. I'm suggesting that some people will do that, won't they? Well, they will, because people say that if you're against multiculturalism, what they think you're talking about when you say multiculturalism is a multiracial or a multi-religious society, and it's not the same thing. I think that's the confusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you're talking about is people living together, getting on within the cultural framework of being British or being in Britain.
Well, I don't see it as a failure of multiculturalism. I think it's the success of multiculturalism. You've got multiple cultures, and they exist, and that's what... if they want that to happen.
But Lewis, surely, when people are living these parallel societies, it's not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to them. It's not helpful to immigrants. You have situations where there are women who are living in sort of these communities of very strict, ultra-conservative Islam who haven't learnt English because they're not being told to learn English. That's not good for the minority groups within those communities.
No, it's not. It might be good for the minority groups. It's not good for the rest of the country. I think it's the arrogance of the British people to think that you could let in people come into this country without kind of vetting to see how vested they were in wanting to be in the country.
Is that something you can gauge, though? I mean, we don't...
I think it's not something you can gauge, which is why immigration can be problematic, and you're going to have these kind of problems. How can you not have these kind of problems?
I mean, I always feel that immigration, and to a large extent, our economy depends on immigration.
No, I don't think it does.
It does.
I don't think it does. I think the globalists depend on immigration, but I don't think this country depends.
Well, our NHS certainly does. I mean,
I don't think our NHS does.
I think it's a sort of catch-22 because obviously business and politicians love immigration because it's like steroids. It gives the economy a shot in the arm. You get people of working age into the country to fill the jobs. But that means those people have to live somewhere. It's not like people are coming across the channel and bringing their own semi-detached houses with them. They need somewhere to live when they get here, and that sends house prices up. There's not enough housing, and then people can't afford housing, so they can't afford to have children.
Well, that's true. Just so I can make my point, though. I mean, I'm not suggesting that isn't a potential issue. But what I'm saying is, perhaps immigration isn't the problem. The problem is integration. The problem is that when people are here, that they're not encouraged by the government to integrate, and the police aren't encouraged to apply the law indiscriminately to everyone, irrespective of their background.
Yeah, and I mean, integration, this sort of idea that nobody's allowed to challenge because it's racist to do it.
Well, the police are seemingly terrified at the...
They're terrified of being called racist. I mean, the Macpherson report came out, 25 years ago, and that was in response to Stephen Lawrence, which was a terrible example of entrenched systemic racism in the Met Police. But, I mean, that was like 25, 30 years ago. We're a different country. We're a different police force now. I think, we can maybe stop tiptoeing around so much. If these were white football football hooligans doing this in Leicester, the police would have no problem going in there, like, swinging some bats around.
You know what it is? The problem is not that people are different or they come from different places and bring their own thing. It's a question of the degree. If there's a few people from countries, then they get into a fight. It's just something that happens in this.
So you think it's about numbers?
It's about numbers. It's the fact that there's two, and especially, I'm not saying in Leicester, just in Leicester, but there's, it's a big deal because 10, 20, 30% of the population.
Okay. Well, let's move on now. We've got another question here. This is from Amy. Amy says, do you think the BBC would sack someone for being an old white male? Well, they've done it before, haven't they? This is actually related to former footballer Mark Lawrenson, who lost his job as a commentator and pundit this summer after 30 years with the BBC, and he claims that he was sacked because he is 65 and a white male. Is that likely?
Thank you for pointing to me. I can say this, the BBC hasn't hired me because I'm 65 and a white male.
You're here, so that's better, isn't it?
I think it's one of those problems. You can't tell whether they've just got tired of the guy. The guy's boring. He's painful to look at. He's like old. He's old. Even I know who he is. I'm not that interested in the guy. Maybe it could be that. You don't know. Maybe they want to bring some new guy in.
He says that actually working at the BBC has made him anti-woke because it's so ingrained in the BBC and everything that they do that he's actually come out of it saying, this is a terrible system.
Right. But so what can be done about it?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Bosses have to be able to fire people for whatever reason it is. And you can't go into the heads of the BBC and say, oh, they're fired this guy.
This isn't just an employer. This is the state broadcaster. So doesn't that make a difference, Lee? I mean, surely we shouldn't be... is it not the case we shouldn't be firing anyone for their immutable characteristics, their skin colour?
Or their age.
Or their age. I mean, wasn't that called ageism once?
Well, normally I'd agree, but I mean, it is Mark Lawrenson. He is a terrible pundit. So I think the BBC made the right call. And, this isn't the hill I'm going to die on as, some sort of anti-woke person.
I have to be honest, I don't know of his work, so I can't judge. You're saying he's not a very good pundit.
It's come about 40 years too late.
What, 10 years before they hired him? Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on. We've got another question now. This is from Joseph. Joseph says, are you worried a far-right party will win the Italian election? Now, this is a very interesting development now. So, as you know, the Italian government unravelled a few months ago, and this new party called Brothers of Italy, led by Giorgia Meloni, and she's developed this incredible momentum. It's looking like she's going to be Italy's new prime minister, that she could form a government with two other parties who are on the right after the voting closes tonight. And if Meloni's coalition take power, people are claiming that this will be the most right-wing government since World War II. I mean, Leo, is this... I mean, we saw recently, didn't we, in Sweden, we had a similar kind of situation because of the failure largely to keep control of gangs and violence.
Immigration.
And immigration, that actually the right-wing parties have won. Yeah. A lot of those parties have been called far-right by various people. Is it just a repeat of that?
Slightly. I mean, we're seeing this happen across Europe. But she's not as far right or as worrying as some other parties in Europe might be. She's fairly, not pro-Europe, but, she's not looking to divest, Italy from
she's
from
anti-Putin.
She's anti-Putin. That's another good thing. So she's supportive of Ukraine, whereas a lot of, right-wing populists, side with Putin and try and rabble-rouse against the sort of, globalist conspiracy they see.
Isn't the issue, I mean, people have compared her to sort of Marine Le Pen kind of figure because she has tried to sort of anaesthetise her image in the way that Marine Le Pen with the Front National, changing the name of the party, all of this kind of thing. And she's done a similar thing here in Italy, Meloni, I mean. But she's got more of a basis because she was part of the youth wing of the fascist movement that was set up after Mussolini died.
Yeah, but everybody makes mistakes when they're young. I mean, Liz Truss was in the Liberal Democrats, so...
Fair point. Yeah. Lewis, do you think there is a worry that what happens when left-wing governments fail to tackle the problems that arise from immigration out of fear of being called racist or whatever it might be, it opens up this vacuum where more reactionary elements can take control? Is that not a serious
Well, I
problem?
think it's either way. It's always. I mean, this is the reason why this is such a big deal is because of Mussolini and what happened during World War II, and there's always that.
Italy doesn't have a great track record when it comes to far-right government.
No, it has one track record, one record, which is Mussolini. So everyone's thinking it's going to be Mussolini. It's the same way. Just because a left comes into power doesn't mean that it's going to be a Stalinist regime.
Yeah,
and I think there's a hypersensitivity about that. There's because of the polarization.
Yeah, but is it possible that Maloney can reform that image, you know, with that kind of background, with that? I mean, some of the things she's saying at the moment don't strike me as particularly far right in terms of the policies that she's talking about. Is it possible, though, that she's just concealing, you know, what her true policies are and that these will emerge when she seizes power?
I don't think she'd ever be able to enact anything that, you know, Hitler or Mussolini did. You know, and she'll be in a coalition with more moderate right-wing parties as well.
Right.
But I think, you know, I agree with Lewis. I mean, Mussolini and Hitler really ruined it for far-right parties in Europe. You know, nobody's, you know, they're always, you've got to make so much effort to, like, push all the nutters away if you've got any kind of right-wing party. 90% of your job is just keeping out the nutters who are going to turn up with, you know, swastikas and all the rest of it.
Exactly. OK, we're going to move on now to a question from Natalie. Natalie says, should meat eaters be banned from having sex? Well, this is an interesting one, and speaking as a vegetarian, I think it's a good idea. Now, this is the animal rights group PETA, I think they pronounce it, and they've called for women to stop having sex with men who eat meat in order to save the world. This is an idea that's been going on for a long time. It's in an old Aristophanes play, Lysistrata, where the women, you know, withhold their sexual services, shall we say, from the men in order to try and put an end to the Peloponnesian War.
Was that a comedy?
It was a comedy.
Because basically, I mean, I know it's like such an old trope, the idea of, like, you know, men wanting sex so bad. But the truth is that women kill for a cuddle. Everything to a woman is sex. Everything is.
So have you been withholding your cuddle?
I've been accused of that, and every man is. You know, they get tired. Older men, you know, we're not that interested anymore. And I think that's what makes this thing so absolutely ridiculous. Because first of all, the whole purpose of veganism is to stop people from having sex. It's part of the death of love. Is that the originators of veganism were the Seventh-day Adventists who associated eating meat with sexual thoughts called carnality.
Yes,
right?
Carnality.
Yes,
right.
carnality.
Well, that's just meat sins of the flesh. That's
yes, it was the idea that by cutting down on meat eating, that men would not be interested in sex.
But look, I'm a vegetarian. What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting is
that I'm dead inside.
Yeah,
sexually and spiritually.
I was saying dead and maybe on the outside.
Well, goodness me, not pulling any punches tonight, I wonder. Don't never apologise. It doesn't suit you. I wonder, Leo. You know, whenever I see a news item with Peter, and whenever I see some of their tweets, I can't help but thinking, are they just trolling us, right? Because sometimes, do you remember when Peter put out that image saying, "Don't assume the gender of an animal," you know, and it had a picture. Honestly, it had a picture as part of this of a pigeon. And it said underneath, they-them pronouns. No, I'm sorry, no pigeon will insist on they-them pronouns. That doesn't happen, does it? So, are Peter just having a laugh?
I think they're doing it for column inches. They know how to get column inches.
They do.
Even if they're trying to stop vegetarians getting any penile inches.
For goodness sake. Must you be so graphic? I
think vegans saying they're not going to have sex, it reminds me of all the ugly women with T-shirts saying, never kissed a Tory. It's like, this is a burden we can suffer, you know?
Right, we've got a question now from Seb, and Seb says, do you think Bond should be more emotional? OK, so this is James Bond producers. They've revealed that in the upcoming movies in the franchise, we're going to see 007 becoming more emotional. And the producers have said that the Daniel Craig's portrayal of James Bond cracked him open emotionally and sort of, you know, set a precedent whereby he can be more emotional. They're also saying there's going to be more bigger roles for women in future Bond films. But listen, Lewis, is it not the case that James Bond, part of the appeal is that he's pretty cold? Like, he's not that emotional. He kills people. Right, so and he uses women. He's a philanderer, and although we don't necessarily approve of that sort of part, he's like an anti-hero, right?
I think women do approve of that. That's the kind that they want. I've spent my entire life being a nice guy, and women don't like that. They want a tough man.
I love nothing more than when you start pontificating about what women like, because you do see yourself as a bit of an expert on the female sex.
I know what women don't like. They don't like me.
Well, quite.
And I know that you sit there and you try to be all giggly. I remember, you know, Leo's expecting a baby, and Josh is just, you know, telling him how to massage the mother's back.
Yeah.
Women don't like that stuff. They don't want that stuff. So they want a tough guy.
They want a tough James Bond figure. They don't want a masculine.
And you can't even ask them whether they want it or not, because they don't know what they want.
Leo, do you take Lewis's advice on women as a father-to-be? Isn't your baby due, like, right now?
Yeah, round about now, yeah.
Thanks for doing the show.
Well, she's sort of going into early labour.
You see, Lewis would say that you shouldn't be there anyway. That actually, you know,
you shouldn't be at the birth. No.
You shouldn't
yeah, you've got to have that Spartan upbringing for your infant child.
Not for your infant. The mother can take care of it. Women have done this for years.
I disagree with you about James Bond, because I think James Bond needs to change, because I've always seen James Bond as an absolutely super real person, just a regular guy with the attitudes, doing the things that you should be doing. You know what I mean? If you're not destroying an entire town on your way to work, then you're not doing it right.
He was making a joke. I think that's a failure of the audience to appreciate that.
It was a good joke. Thank you for reprimanding them for that, for your lack of laughter. Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be getting some more on one of the topics that we have just been discussing. That's the violence in Leicester between Muslim and Hindu groups. And, we're going to be covering that, so don't miss it.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Hindu and Muslim community leaders have called for an end to the violence between groups in Leicester. At least 47 people have been arrested since the unrest started almost a month ago. Leicester has one of the highest proportions of British South Asians in the UK, and it's been claimed that the recent incidents raise serious questions about multiculturalism. To discuss this, I'm joined by Alpesh Patel, who's the chairman of City Hindus, a not-for-profit organisation in London. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Let's just begin with this suggestion that these recent events, the violence that we've seen on the streets, the videos that have gone viral, that this represents or suggests that multiculturalism as a project is a failed project. What do you feel about that?
I'll just check the colour on my skin. What do you think I think about that?
Well,
I think there is a danger to any kind of multicultural project if the individuals in that community don't integrate, don't assimilate, don't embrace the values of the nation, British values, which don't go against anything I've ever been taught in my religion, by the way, or at home, or by my nationality of heritage. If you have got those and get a decent education so they understand the history of the nation and all the rest of it, then I think multiculturalism works perfectly fine. Because when I asked my mum, who was an NHS nurse, no problems with multiculturalism. My grandfather British Army soldier in the Second World War, no problems with multiculturalism, embraced all those values, loved the nation. That's when it works fine. If you don't have that, if you've got a group of people who will say, do you know what, I disagree fundamentally with British values of secularism, liberalism, free speech, and I'm going to take offence at that, and I want things changed so I've got special privilege, then you've got a problem not just with multiculturalism, you've got a problem with any community.
So does it come down to definitions? Because a lot of people disagree about what multiculturalism means. When some people say multiculturalism, they're thinking of multiracialism, multi-religious. In other words, lots of different types of people. But when I usually use multiculturalism, I'm talking about this notion that individual cultures should be preserved at the expense of the host culture, and that you end up with these kind of parallel societies living in their own little bubbles. So do you think we just need to communicate what we mean by multiculturalism a bit better?
I think on the whole, it's one of those things which once you get bogged down into the definitions, it gets really confusing. I think most of us know what it means. It means that I'm not ghettoised.
Yeah.
So if I choose only to live in my little square area with people who look like me, have the same religious beliefs as me, have the same eating habits as me, then we're going to have a problem sooner or later.
Yes.
Not necessarily with me, might be with my children. It might be with, wait a minute, everybody just looks the same, but they don't look like the let me put it this way, native population, which is probably not the best word, but the host, if you want to put it that way. And it's that ability to say, well, actually, no, I've embraced it. I've just come back from the United States. What I'm talking about is embracing it. So you're Italian-American.
Yes.
You'll die for your country even though you're of Italian heritage. That's what I mean about embracing the nation, embracing those values, those British values.
But why is this even an issue? Because the vast...
You raised it.
Well, no. Well, insofar...
I didn't think it was an issue.
No. What I think is an issue is that the vast majority of the people involved in the riots are British. We're not talking about people from other cultures. These are British lads. These are British people, right?
It's a passport, unless inherently there's been that embracing of, like I said, British values. When I dropped my 4.5-year-old son to nursery, you see it in the nursery, it tells you what British... Because, I'd have difficulty saying what exactly are British values beyond the ones that I've mentioned. But it tells you. I think it's a legal obligation in every single school, and I'm glad it is.
Yes.
It tells them, these are British values. We respect other religions. We don't think one is superior to another. We respect freedom of speech, OK? The liberalism, your freedom of thought, freedom of expression, all of those aspects of being in Britain. So that's what we want.
But why is it that, my question really is, why is it that seems to be less of a problem with the older generations who are not involving themselves in this kind of thing, but it's actually the younger British people who seem to have a problem with those
I was speaking to a
values.
local politician before I came on air from Leicester, and she said, yep, they're British, they're poor, they're uneducated. If we have pockets of deprivation... Now, you might say, wait a minute, they've been here. They've been born here.
Yeah.
How come that's still a problem? What's happening with the schools? And why should that be the problem of Britain in the sense of, hang on, their parents, yes, came here, but how come this hasn't been solved? And I think, I tend to think that problems start in the family and the household. I don't think the state's the answer to everything. I do think there are pockets of deprivation and poverty and unemployment. That's one thing, but I don't want to say blame the state for everything. I'm afraid I'd say parents, the home as well. It's a complicated issue. And I'd say they've got a responsibility. So you're right, the parents aren't involved in any of the troubles, but what the heck are they teaching the children? Or what aren't they teaching the children?
So the way in which these riots have been represented in the press, and a lot of people have talked about the way in which these young people, young men mostly, let's be honest, are seemingly identifying more with India and Pakistan rather than Britain, and actually that all of this originated from the cricket match that happened. Do you think that that is a fair reflection of what is going on here?
I was actually really gutted because England just lost to Pakistan. But I was gutted because it was England losing rather than Pakistan winning. There is... Look, it's like with America as well. You can have two loyalties as such. But
yes,
what's your first loyalty to? My first loyalty won't be to my religion. And if anybody says their first loyalty is to a religion, you want to watch out. That's an extremist. My first loyalty will either be to family, country, king. It'll be one of those things, my values, when push comes to shove. And on a cricket match, I really don't care if somebody supports India or England and they will happen to be born here and all the rest of it. I actually support Yorkshire. I was born in Leeds. So when Yorkshire played India, when Tendulkar was playing, I was shouting for Yorkshire. Right. And that was India's greatest batsman playing for them anyway. But it needs to have that kind of an attitude that actually this isn't that important, that the whole tribal stick. I support Leeds United. You know, I've been to those football matches where you get the same level of tribalism. It's like, look, calm down.
But it feels like an excuse, doesn't it? Like, I refuse to believe this is really about cricket.
I think you're exactly right. You know the two groups which weren't fighting and angry during the India-Pakistan game? The players.
Yeah.
Players are friends.
Yeah.
They get on. They're role models for bilateral relations. And I think you're right. I think it's an excuse when there is a tinderbox of poverty and all these other things. Now, I'm lucky. I come from a community where you've got the pharmacists, you know, they laugh at us. Oh, you're doctors, lawyers, medics, or, you know, you're going to be running the 24-hour convenience shop and all the rest of it. We've been lucky as Indians in this community to benefit from a phenomenal education system, OK, become professionals in all those fields. But we want that shared because it's in our own interest, you can see it, with the Pakistani population. And we should be reaching out to say to them, look, this is how we've succeeded. All the data proves it in terms of educational attainment for the Indian community. We want to reach out to you guys, as we've done. I've co-founded organisations where we literally do that. We have Indians and Pakistanis together mentoring others because, and they have hugely successful people as role models on theirs. And the point is, let's lift ourselves together because we understand your problems better than anybody else does because we're cut from the same cloth. We're cut from the same geography. We eat the same food and pretty much understand the same language and everything else. And I think it's also beholden on us as Indians to reach out to the Pakistani community and say, look, we want you elevated because we know when we look at the data. Now, I've tried during the Black Lives Matter to try and do the same with the black community, but we don't have that relationship as strongly with them because just geographics, demography. But again, it's beholden on all of us. And I'd loathe for anybody to say, well, actually, it's the fault of a country to which I'm incredibly grateful to be here. And you might say, well, why are you grateful? You were born here. You've got every right to be entitled to everything else. No, actually, every time I land at Heathrow Airport, I say to myself, thank God my grandfather was in the British Army because that gave me the right to be here.
Just to address, one of the suggestions that has been made is that a lot of the tensions have occurred because of far-right nationalist Hindus who have recently come to the country and that this has sparked these tensions. Do you think there's anything in that?
I'm still looking for them. I think there's a bit of a bogeyman thing. So I asked my wife, I said, they're talking about this RSS Hindutva thing. She's Hindu. And she said, what's that? Now, that's worrying that if this bogeyman exists... Now, if I said to her ISIS, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, she'd know exactly what I was talking about. If I said to her jihadi, she'd know what I was talking about. So if she can't find them...
Yes.
And there's been some reports that have been going around. I think the Henry... something society, I've forgotten the name. They've been looking, the journalist is doing a PhD.
The Henry Jackson Society.
Henry Jackson, I should know that. Free speech and all that. And the journalist there couldn't find them.
Yes.
So somebody can point them out. Now, then they've said, oh, well, no, wait a minute, it's because of what's going on in India, the world's largest democracy, liberal, secular, with the second largest Muslim population in the world, which has had 3 Muslim presidents, you know, Sikh as prime minister, which is 2% of the population. We can't do that in Britain. We won't get somebody from 2% of the population ever be either head of state or head of government. And that's fine. But the point is, well, that's a bit of a red herring to say it's some tiny little group, apparently, which nobody seems to have heard of over here.
Well, it's just trying to find another reason why it could happen, trying to explain the inexplicable.
I think if you've got a load of angry people, you can put them in a football match and they're going to kick off, and it's got nothing to do with their side losing. It's about other issues they've got, and we've got to find out what those issues are and how do we help resolve them, because at the end of the day, it's our country, and until you can revoke passports and export them en masse, which I don't think is a realistic proposition, though some people might think so who are watching, then you've got to work out, well, how do we solve this problem? And actually get them engaged to use those energies. My God, they're energetic, we know that. You know, use that for the economic good of the nation and put them to good work and good use and give them fulfilled lives. I mean, these are people we can still talk to. It's not like they're Al-Qaeda or something. There's just no point talking to them. These are regular people. You sit down over a coffee with them, and I bet you, you know, all the shouting they do, that'd stop, and it'd just be like, oh, actually, you're not that bad.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got a few problems, I've got a few problems, we disagree on a few things. Let's see how we can work it out together and work together.
So communication, that's the key.
Bit of empathy probably as well.
Empathy as well. Great. Alpesh Patel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by the teacher who was sacked for refusing to use a biologically female student's preferred pronouns. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A teacher has been sacked after he refused to use a student's preferred pronouns. Kevin Lister had taught maths for 18 years before he was dismissed for gross misconduct. A biologically female student asked to be referred to by her preferred male name and he/him pronouns, but he said he wanted to speak to the 17-year-old's parents first. I'm delighted to say that Kevin Lister joins me now in the studio. Thank you for joining me, Kevin. So, a lot of people won't have heard of this story. There's been a couple of reports today, but very little on it. Perhaps you can tell us exactly what happened from the beginning.
Sure, thanks. So, round about this time last year, a student says to me that she would now like to be known as a new name and referred to as a male. So, I raised a safeguarding concern as the immediate response for me. I asked 3 questions. I asked, was there parental consent? Was the student making an informed decision, and was there a risk that the student could take cross-sex hormone treatment? So I'm just a humble mathematician. The safeguarding concern is a neutral act on my side. It's not for me to investigate, it's not for me to make any judgment, but certainly my view was that I should not support the student's wish to transition unless I have got clear parental consent and the parents are making an informed decision as well. So I then went down to safeguarding after about a week and a half to see what had happened and what follow-up they had made. And I was gobsmacked when safeguarding said that they were not going to speak to the parents about this.
But is it not the law that the schools have to speak to the parents?
I would have thought so, yeah. There's the Parental Responsibility Act, which says that the parents are responsible for the naming of the child.
Yes.
And any change to the name of the child. The student was 17, so therefore under 18, therefore a child.
Yes.
So yeah, the law is that the school and the teachers cannot change a student's name.
So how did we get from you raising these issues in terms of safeguarding to you being dismissed?
Sure. So there's a number of things that started building up along the route there. So the response from the colleges, say, was they were not going to speak to the parents. And I said, well, you know, what do we know about the other issues? And they said, well, the student can go to counselling if she wants. And I say I was gobsmacked. I tried to plead with them that this was potentially a really dangerous issue, and they wouldn't move forward. So I go back to the classroom day by day, and I now find myself in an extremely difficult position. So I now know that the college are actively not going to seek parental consent. I know that with the trans affirmative policy in the college, then for me to use, as they like to call it, the dead name, she's not dead obviously, but to use her birth name, that I would be accused of transphobia. But to use her new name, I would then be encouraging a social transition without parental consent. So I'm left in a difficult position in the classroom. I try to manage it as best as I can.
Sort of avoid names altogether.
Avoid any name altogether and say, how do you feel about that kind of thing? And try to be as gentle and supportive and polite as I possibly could in the nearly impossible circumstances that I had found myself in. So the things progress along. We then, about a week after the safeguarding referral, there's a maths competition, a female maths competition. And I'm encouraging all the girls in the class to have a go.
Yes.
I'm a mathematician. I like to do maths. I like to encourage my students to do the same as well. And the student puts a hand up at the back of the class and says, "Can I still enter the competition?" I said, "Of course you can, because you're a girl. Girls' competition," and I put her birth name up on the board, along with the other girls that wanted to do so. And I subsequently get accused of dead naming her by the college for
Even though
doing
she was the one who asked to be involved in the competition?
In the girls' competition, yeah.
So that, I mean, this all raises a number of issues, doesn't it? Because in terms of teaching staff and students as well, it kind of imposes an ideological worldview on people. It says that, for the vast majority of us, we use pronouns to denote biological sex. That's the way that we use the language. That's the way that the vast majority of people use the language. But when they are saying that you must change that, you must use it in order to denote gender identity as opposed to biological sex, that is an imposition. It's verging on compelled speech, isn't it?
Completely, yeah. And for me, as a teacher, I teach maths. We teach logic, we teach reason. That's why I went into teaching. And I think if I am forced to support some idea of fantasy, basically, the question then is, well, what's the point of actually teaching at all?
Yes.
What's the point of teaching reason and ration and argument if, as soon as you have a challenge, you do nothing? Do
you think is this a widespread problem with schools at the moment? And are they, bypassing certain legal obligations when it comes to parental care?
Yeah, this is clearly a huge problem across the country. It's a massive problem in the college that I was at, Swindon New College. I'm obviously not there now, so I don't know how many students are transitioning now, but I hear anecdotally there's a significant number of primarily female students wanting to transition.
Yes, so how do we tackle this insofar as if people are accused of transphobia or hate whenever they raise any kind of objection to this, then that puts us in a bind, because automatically it suggests that there shouldn't be a discussion here.
Yeah, the whole ethos of this movement is to accuse people who question it of transphobia. That's the way this organisation, this movement, actually works. I think what I think needs to be done is this needs to be considered point blank, period, as a safeguarding issue.
Right.
That as soon as a student is looking to change her gender or her name, it's a safeguarding issue, and the schools and the education system should immediately look at it down that route.
What we've seen with the Tavistock Clinic and the way in which the Tavistock Clinic has been closed as a result of the Cass report, that actually there are clear dangers, that this isn't good for child welfare, that people can be fast-tracked onto puberty blockers and then onto cross-sex hormones. A lot of the time it's because of other issues, because of autism or even just homosexuality. Sometimes we're just dealing with gay kids who are struggling with their sexuality.
Yeah, it can be a wide range of things. And it's not for me to judge what those things are. I raise a safeguarding issue. I expect the school to sit down with the parents and any medical practitioners and to work a solution out and to get down to what the nub of the problem is. It's not for me to do.
Were you surprised when you were dismissed?
I was gobsmacked. I was absolutely gobsmacked. It was really completely out the blue.
Is the purpose of that to dissuade other teachers from raising objections?
It's clearly the purpose. Not only did I raise that safeguarding concern, but I actually raised a second safeguarding concern as well in the college. In some ways, this one is even more serious. And this related to a trans activist teacher who is actively transitioning students. Now, I don't know how far she got with the transitioning.
By that, you mean socially transitioning or encouraging social transitioning?
Well, in the presentation that she gave us warnings for things that we need to look at, that young students who are transitioning might well be on cross-sex hormones. In her words, they might be showing signs of early menopause. So she's clearly getting them down onto the cross-sex hormone pathway.
So this is a key point, isn't it? That a number of teachers now are activists first and teachers second.
Yeah.
You tend to see this more in America, and you think this is an American problem. But from what you're describing, actually, there's a problem here as well.
This is happening here.
Right. And then to take a stand against that, you end up being dismissed and accused of being hateful.
Yeah. So so because I wouldn't use the pronouns without parental consent, because I'd raised questions at a training session about the risk of basically a false positive that we encourage a student to transition. How do we know that that's basically not a false positive? Because I raised those two issues, then I was accused of transphobia.
Do you think that's why there has been so little discussion on this issue? Because eventually schools are surely going to have to come to terms with something here.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary situation. I would never have thought when I came into teaching nearly 18 years ago that we'd end up with students coming out of school unable to tell the difference between a male and a female. And it's almost now as if this thing has now developed such a powerful momentum that it's difficult to stop it, that the schools themselves cannot stop it. It's almost like, to quote Macbeth, that you've waded in blood so far that it's more tiresome to turn back than to continue. So it seems to me, this is just merely my speculation, that the management of certain schools, certainly the new college that I was at, have been pushing this transgender model as a model for their diversity so hard over recent years that for them now to turn around and say, well, actually, we've made a mistake and that these people are now suffering harm and damage, it's too much of a liability for them. So the easiest thing for management to protect their jobs is to keep this momentum going and pretend nothing is happening.
That's a very interesting point, because I note since the Cass report, I haven't seen many of the people who have been promoting gender identity ideology admit that they made a mistake and that actually the practices at the Tavistock, what the whistleblowers were warning about and were ignored, that all of this had been a mistake and that they have said, actually, we got it wrong. No one seems to want to admit that there might be potential dangers for young people, and particularly young gay people.
Yeah, exactly. And the evidence has been there. It's been there right for years and years. There was a study done in Sweden in 2010.
Yes.
And it was a devastating critique. What it showed was that the risk of suicide for female-to-male transitioners was 40 times greater than normal background, 40 times greater. And we've got schools in this country encouraging students to go down these pathways. It is absolutely beyond me to understand how we've ended up into this situation.
And so what will happen to you next? What action are you taking? What do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, so we'll be taking action against the school.
For wrongful dismissal?
For wrongful dismissal and for discrimination as well. So working with the solicitors and barristers on that at the moment. I'll be launching a crowdfunder. We're just getting the barristers' case together at the moment. So once that's in place, then we'll start the crowdfunding to start taking it forward.
And this could really be a significant case insofar as you won't be the only one who is going through this, and certainly won't be the only one who's going to go through this kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
and actually, we need these kind of precedents to ward it off, don't we?
Yeah. No question about it. And in this particular case, I've been as rigid as I can. I've gone down the safeguarding. I've raised the safeguarding in relation to my student, and I've raised the safeguarding in relation to the trans activist teachers. And the school has done nothing at all in terms of investigating either of those safeguarding concerns. On the safeguarding concern I raised with my student, the answer I got back from the college when I put my grievance appeal through was that they did not need to inform the parents because it was only a name change. I mean, that was just absurd. It was just absolutely absurd, even though I was being dismissed and suspended for transphobia.
Wow. Well, there's a lot to think about there. Good luck with it. And
thank you very much
for coming to talk to us about it.
OK,
Appreciate
super.
it.
My pleasure.
Now then, every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. We're going to take a look at a few videos that have been going viral this week. And first up, this is a woman who took to social media, I think it was TikTok, to describe a horrible ordeal in a unisex changing room at Primark.
yeah, I was trying on some clothes and it was a unisex changing room, which I'm really for, and I love that because, you know, it makes everyone feel included. But twice, 2 men opened the curtain, walked in on me. Luckily, both times I was wearing fully clothed, but I could easily not have been. Yeah, it was 2 different people, clearly from the same group, and there was probably like 100 changing rooms available. So it's not like, you know, it was like, oh, is someone in here or not? It was, you know, clearly. Yeah, the first time it was like as they walked in, they did it, and then the second time was one of them said to the other one, "Oh, like, have you tried it on? Like, can I see?" And then yeah, he opened it.
Now, it's quite striking with that video because she's clearly very, very distressed, but she also says that she's all for inclusivity, and so she's, you know, positive about Primark having abolished its single-sex changing facilities. But it's quite clear, I think, from that video, Leo, am I not right about this, that if you do abolish single-sex changing facilities, it's going to be abused and exploited by people who are predatory?
Yeah, unfortunately, men are terrible people.
Wow.
So, you know, you can't trust them to all do the right thing.
Yeah, not all men, of course.
I'd say all men.
Yeah, OK.
all men.
I mean, but isn't it sad, though, that even in that, you know, she says she can't go back there ever again. She's going to take the clothes home to try because she's too scared.
Well,
you know, and yet
she's
she's still saying, but I support inclusivity, and, you know, there's something really sad about that.
I mean, it's Primark. She could just buy them. They're like £1.50.
Well, that's a slightly different issue, isn't it? What do you think about this, Lewis? Do you think that we should, you know, I mean, it's a horrible situation, isn't it? We need single-sex spaces, don't we?
I don't know. I'm just upset with the woman's hair.
OK.
She wanted the inclusivity. She wanted the single-sex changing rooms.
I think people just say that now. I think that people just say that as a kind of mantra.
Well, then don't say it.
Well,
I mean, if you say it, don't be upset when you get it.
Let's have a look at the next video now. This is Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, and here he is singing the Queen classic Bohemian Rhapsody 2 days before the Queen's funeral. Now, I haven't seen much of the reaction on social media. Is the point that this is insensitive? Is that the point that people are saying?
It depends which paper you read.
Right.
So, in the left-wing press, this is shown as Justin Trudeau, you know, letting his hair down and showing he's a man of the people and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in the right-wing press, it's a flagrant, you know, disrespect to the Queen and the monarchy.
I see. And which stance do you take?
I think it's definitely the worst thing Justin Trudeau's ever done.
Really?
So yeah, worse than all that blackface, worse than cutting off credit and banking facilities to people who supported truckers. Yeah.
I mean, we have to be grateful he's not in blackface, because in most clips he is.
Yeah.
You know,
well, it's lucky he was singing Queen and not Stevie Wonder.
Well, quite exactly. Are you a fan of Justin Trudeau, Lewis?
I'm not a fan of the Queen either. I mean, I mean, nobody was upset about the Queen.
What a ridiculous thing to say, Lewis, for goodness sake.
No, but I don't think people were...
10 days of mourning.
She was 96 years old. Not a single person was surprised. I know they had 10 days of mourning, but it wasn't like, oh, my God, I'm devastated by this whole thing. I mean, you know...
You're avoiding my question, aren't you? Because you don't know who Justin Trudeau is.
No, I know who Justin Trudeau... Wait a second.
Exactly, you don't know.
No, I do know, but I'm going to say something. I know. I think
Prime Minister of Canada.
Justin Trudeau is one of the worst people ever on the face of the earth. He's worse than the Queen.
Answer me this, Lewis. Why is it that Justin Trudeau can get away with wearing blackface, and that goes on viral videos, and they elect him in? If a Conservative politician had done that, do you think there is any chance that he could have been elected again?
I mean, I think stuff has come out of young Conservatives doing that with burnt champagne corks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I haven't seen that.
But yeah, I mean, I think the left definitely hold themselves to different standards, because they say, well, we're morally pure, so if we did it, we must have been joking around. Whereas if you do it, you're Hitler.
But it was so extreme because he didn't just put polish on his face.
Yeah.
He had ripped jeans and he'd even blacked up his legs.
That's the attention to detail he brings to governing.
Yeah. I wish it was. Anyway, this is we've got one more little clip. This is Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield potentially skipping the queue to see the Queen lying in state. Let's have a look. Now, you can see the queue here, people queuing in the background while the TV presenters make their own way to Westminster Hall. This caused a lot of a stir. There were a lot of debates about this because, did you know this, Lewis, that when, these queues, 9 hours?
My son...
Longer.
My son was in the queue and he waited 10 hours.
10 hours?
Yeah, 10 hours for it.
And it was something like 5 miles in the end. It was absolutely... But apparently, it wasn't just people... Now, I get it. Westminster Hall is obviously connected to the House of Parliament. If you're an MP, that's your place of work. I suppose there's an argument that you can skip the queue rather... And also MPs have a lot of important stuff to do. I'd rather they weren't queuing for 10 hours.
Philip Schofield isn't an MP.
Right. So why is Philip Schofield? Why is...
Because
the other one?
Because Philip Schofield is smart. And why would you wait 10 hours in a queue if somebody says, hey, come in? If somebody doesn't even say come in, of course you're going to cut the line. It's so British.
He doesn't work there, but how did he get a pass?
Why didn't he just turn around and say, instead of trying to make excuses and say, oh no, we weren't really, queue jumping or anything, he should have just said, look, I'm Philip Schofield.
He's Philip Schofield.
I'm not going to queue up with you plebs. I'm Philip Schofield.
Yeah.
I've got places to be. I've got loads of money.
He has spent, and you should appreciate this, he has spent decades hiding his gayness. Okay, if you remember correctly.
Why should I appreciate that, Lewis? What are you saying?
Because
you've spent longer hiding your gayness.
Because you know how hard it is to have that secret. To have a secret. And so, give the guy a break. Can I tell you something? I don't like the Queen, but I think the British people's attitude towards Philip Schofield is worse. Is one of the worst things.
I think people were concerned with Philip Schofield because of the cheating element. It wasn't because he was gay. It was because his
Let him cheat. That is, every British person is a scam. But what makes this so bad is that the British people are like saying, oh, you're just like us. You think you're better than us. It's like, I don't know what it's called. It's called like looking down on people.
Yeah, I think...
What is that called?
It's called looking down on people.
Looking down, and that's what they're doing. Instead of saying, good on you, Philip. If we could get away with it, we would have gotten away with it.
No, I think people resent... look, anyway, it doesn't matter. We've got to end the show now. On that note, on that Philip Schofield note, thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This, of course, was the week when women in Iran took a stand for their rights. Big tech escalated its assault on free speech. And the Home Secretary called on the police to, well, solve some crimes. Thank you to my lovely panel, Lewis Schaefer and Leo Kearse, and to my guests, Yasmin Mohammed, Alpesh Patel, Toby Young, Caroline Fisk, and Kevin Lister. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. It's right there on the screen as I speak. Come along. We've got some wine and cakes and a couple of vol-au-vents, I think, this time. They really pushed the boat out. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight, and I'll see you next week.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather in the UK, and the overnight rain will clear far south early morning with blustery showers elsewhere. Let's take a look at the details. There will be plenty of showers across much of Scotland through much of the morning. It will be windy too, and that will add to the chilly autumnal feel to the day. It's looking similar across Northern Ireland with showers for many and strong winds too. Temperatures will be lower than of late for most. There will be showers around parts of northwest England as well. These are most likely to be areas exposed to the chilly north to northwesterly wind. That is how the weather across Wales is shaping up as well. Whilst it won't be as chilly a start as some recent days, it will feel colder during the day, especially in the wind. Some showery rain is likely further east too, around the Midlands. It should turn drier later. Still blustery and feeling chillier than of late in the wind. It's a similar picture across East Anglia. Some showers are likely first thing, most likely across Norfolk, but some of them will feed further southwards into Suffolk as well. Meanwhile, southernmost counties will be mostly dry for a time once the overnight rain has cleared away, before showers spread here later. It will be blustery and chillier than of late. Staying blustery or windy for much of the UK through the rest of the morning, with showers and a chilly autumnal feel. And that is how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, as the Labour Party conference gets underway, I'll be giving my verdict on the man who wants to be our next Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. In the big question, has Friday's budget gifted Labour the next election? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including politics legend Anne Widdecombe. And my Mark Meets guest is disgraced former Conservative MP and top government minister Jonathan Aitken, a man who has completely turned his life around. He'll be talking about bankruptcy, jail and personal redemption. Plus, I'll get his verdict on our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. That's Jonathan Aitken live in the studio. I should say the Reverend, because he's now a priest. Plus, we've got tomorrow's papers with full panel reaction. And that big opinion is on its way. And it's all about Keir Starmer. And I'm not pulling my punches. But first, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Day one of the Labour Party conference has come to a close. Sir Keir Starmer announced plans to end the UK's dependence on fossil fuels by 2030. The leader of the opposition will use the annual gathering to set out his energy plan and appeal to voters who are, as he says, sick and tired of soaring energy costs. He opened the conference with a tribute to the late Queen.
She knew that the country she came to symbolise is bigger than any one individual or institution. An example that taught us that whatever challenges we face, the value of service endures. And a reminder that the creativity, the hard work, the enterprise that defines this nation is as abundant now as it ever was.
The Deputy Labour leader says Britain's at a crossroads as she addressed her party's annual conference. During a lengthy speech, Angela Rayner vowed Labour would raise economic standards by clawing back public money from those who failed to deliver for taxpayers. She outlined the party's plans for new rights for workers, announcing what she calls a fair work standard. It aims to guarantee job security, training and union access. She also promised to pump money back into pockets of local communities.
The moment of choice is upon us. Our movement to show our country what we can do together. A Labour government to unite this country through the darkest times ahead. A Labour government to hand power back to the people and the places that once powered Britain. And a Labour government that will always be on the side of working people.
Voting has been taking place in Italy today, and it could see the election of the country's most right-wing government since World War II and its first female Prime Minister. An alliance led by Giorgia Meloni called Brothers of Italy appeared on course for victory when the last opinion polls were published. However, support for the left-leaning Five Star movement has picked up in recent days. Voting continues until 10 p.m. UK time. 2 teenagers aged 15 and 16 have been charged with the murder of Kaylee McLean, who was stabbed in Yorkshire on Wednesday. The 15-year-old died in hospital following the attack near the entrance of North Huddersfield Trust School. The teenagers who have been charged are both from Huddersfield and have been remanded in custody. They'll both appear at Leeds Magistrates Court on Monday. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Tatiana Sanchez, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. As the Labour Party conference kicks off in Liverpool, we'll be looking at whether Sir Keir Starmer has what it takes to be our next Prime Minister. In the big question, has Friday's budget gifted Labour the next election? I'll put that to the political editor of the Daily Express Online, David Maddox, former top Labour government minister Dennis McShane, and ex-Tory minister and politics legend Anne Widdecombe. In the news agenda with my panel, we'll discuss all of that. Plus, do opposites attract when it comes to love? And is Britain's housing market broken beyond repair? Tackling all of those issues and much more are my fantastic panel of the former leader of UKIP and Army veteran Henry Bolton, health expert and model Angie Best, her body's a temple, and TV personality, model and writer Precious Muir. My Mark Meets guest is just a bit special. What a story. Disgraced former Conservative MP and former Cabinet Minister Jonathan Aitken, a man who has completely turned his life around. He'll be talking bankruptcy, jail and personal redemption. He's live in the studio after 10 and I'll get his verdict on our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. In my take at 10, I'll be dealing with Primark and their bizarre policy of unisex changing rooms, which has left a young woman in tears. Find out more very shortly. It's a truly chilling story, and the company's reaction is beyond words. That's my take at 10 at 10 o'clock. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. The best bit of my programme is when you get in touch. mark@gbnews.uk. And this show has a golden rule. What is that rule? Do you know what that rule is? We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, 2 hours of big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Tax cuts for the rich, the scrapping of a cap on bankers' bonuses, and no extra windfall tax on energy firms. There are plenty of headlines from Friday's budget that could hand Labour the next election. But be careful what you wish for. You have to hand it to this new daredevil partnership of Truss and Kwarteng for having a set of policies that will look and sound terrible on the doorstep, and which Keir Starmer will be crowing about when he makes his keynote speech at the Labour Party conference on Tuesday. But Truss and Kwarteng are not stupid. They've decided, after a few short days in office, to be the opposite of Labour and the opposite of Keir Starmer. They're willing to soak up the negative press and the bad headlines because their budget is geared towards firing up the economy and boosting national income so that we all win. A bigger, more productive and wealthier economy has the means with which to help the poorest in our society. It's like a business which is growing, one which is able to invest and hire more people and give staff pay rises and maybe buy a new HQ. That's what a growing, successful business looks like. A business that's shrinking or living off the company overdraft will be laying people off, cutting wages and dying a slow death. You help people by being strong, not by being weak. So this new government wants Britain to be strong. It's for growth. Labour is not. This new government is for low taxes. Labour is not. This new government is pro-fracking and pro-exploiting our fossil fuel reserves for the short to medium term so that we're not reliant on tyrants like Vladimir Putin for our energy. Labour is not. This new government is pro-aspiration and pro-capitalism. Labour is not. It appears right now that we've got our first Prime Minister since Blair in the 2000s and Thatcher in the 80s that actually believes in something, and she's going to put it into action. After 12 years of treading water and a disastrous overreaction to the panic in terms of the pandemic, we now have a Conservative government that's got ideas and policies that they will see through. Truss is gambling not just on the economy, but on her entire political future. At last, someone with courage in politics. Who knew you had to elect a woman to get a politician with balls these days? Which takes me to the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. Mr. Middle Ground, Captain Vanilla, an eye-catchingly mediocre politician. The Labour right find him too left-wing and can't forgive him for supporting Corbyn, and the left see him as a Corbyn traitor or a red Tory. They say, don't they, that you can't please all of the people all of the time. Well, Starmer doesn't please anyone any of the time. His main selling point seems to be that he's not lots of other people. He's not Boris Johnson, and now he's not Liz Truss. But who is he? Well, he's the duplicitous political schemer who served in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. Jeremy Corbyn, a man who effectively sided with Russia during the Salisbury attack. A man who threatened to bankrupt the country by nationalising everything that moved, and who presided over a Labour Party that was so anti-Semitic some of the most talented Jewish MPs in the House of Commons left Parliament. He presided over a party so toxic that the highly talented BBC journalist Laura Koonsberg had to attend the 2017 Labour Party conference with a bodyguard. And the hard left are the nice people, by the way. Do keep up. That was Corbyn's Labour Party, and Keir Starmer campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister, which, in my view, would have been a clear and present danger to our economy and our national security. Don't forget, Corbyn has always wanted to scrap nuclear weapons and refused to say, when leader of the opposition, that he would use them if Britain was attacked. So this country would have been poorer and less safe on his watch. And yet, duplicitous Starmer wanted him as PM. Why? Political expediency. Starmer is not stupid. In fact, he's a very, very bright lawyer, and I've got no doubt he's a nice man too. But everything he does is a political calculation, not born out of principle or conviction. Great Labour leaders of the past, Clement Attlee, Tony Blair, John Smith, Neil Kinnock, these were transformative Labour leaders and very principled men. It's my view that Starmer will say anything to get power. We don't really know what he believes because neither does he. But what bothers me most about Starmer is not his political expediency, which is far from unusual in Westminster. It's his judgment. His judgment in effectively calling for a second referendum as shadow Brexit secretary. Starmer was the architect of Labour's response to Brexit. It enraged the Red Wall and lost Labour the election. Love them or hate them, it's pretty clear what this new government and Liz Truss stand for: growth and aspiration. This Labour Party stands for whatever you want to hear, or at least the audience in Islington in North London, upon which Labour is so focused. If this was a true reinvention of New Labour, I would take it seriously, and I would consider voting Labour. But I don't buy this. I'm not sure his heart is really in bringing back an aspirational Labour Party, and one which is financially prudent. Prudent, of course, being a catchword of Blair and Brown. Not when he won't condemn the strikes which threaten to derail Britain's economic recovery. And they've announced that they will reintroduce a 45% tax on the highest earning people in our country. A cheap political gimmick that produces scant dividends for the Treasury and which sends the wrong message about Britain's attractiveness for high flyers. I want rich people in Britain. I want them to pay their taxes here and go shopping here. We'll all be richer. If you think my view that the top rate should be 40%, if you think that's wide of the mark, remember that for almost an entire decade of the last Labour government, the top rate was 40%. Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair,
He's Tony Blair, Mr Vague, a grey, sanctimonious, pious figure whose judgment was wrong on Brexit, wrong on Corbyn, and most egregiously, wrong on COVID. Don't forget, Starmer called Freedom Day in July of last year reckless when Britain led Europe out of COVID restrictions. He called it reckless. He said that school closures were inevitable. And by the way, in terms of reckless, let's be clear, it would have been reckless not to reopen the country last summer. I said it, and I think I've been proved right. Cases fell, and since then, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, and lockdowns are looking like the most failed public health measure in history. It's pretty clear that if Starmer had been Prime Minister, we would have had more lockdowns, more economic damage, and we would have lived under even more of an authoritarian state. When Boris Johnson made the appalling mistake of having 3 national lockdowns, for which I will never forgive him, we needed opposition from Keir Starmer. But to steal a line from the majestic Dan Wootton, he was the leader of no opposition, waving these disastrous policies through, which have left the country in the mess that we're currently in. The only opposition we did have was from 100 or so Tory backbenchers who threatened their careers by voting against their own government's plans. That is what political courage looks like. Starmer may think he's bringing back New Labour, but you can't make a souffle rise twice. A soggy bottom is a more likely outcome. And a final thought on Keir Starmer's judgment. He just seems to have got every big call wrong, as I've mentioned. Corbyn, Brexit, COVID, but now, today, add energy to that, as he announced his plans to spend billions on sustainable green energy between now and 2030. And not a squeak from him about nuclear. Why? Because his bonkers membership don't like nuclear, even though it is patently a long-term answer for this country. Germany, under Angela Merkel, scrapped nuclear in 2011, and how's that working out for them? Now, I'm all for a bit of wind, wave and solar. In time, they will be good. But Germany has invested $500 billion in renewables over 10 years, and yet they face a winter energy crisis. Renewables are currently unreliable, expensive, and have created the mess in which we now find ourselves. Another expensive experiment, just like lockdowns. Again, it's a question of judgment. I think the Labour Party shouldn't underestimate Friday's bold budget and its positive, aspirational message about Britain. God knows it's risky, but political courage is very often rewarded. A great mark of leadership. Fortune favours the brave. Starmer hasn't taken a risk in his life, which is why I don't think he will ever win a majority at a general election. But even that's a worry, because a hung parliament could lead to something worse. A Britain-hating coalition of hell, made up of Labour and the SNP, with a few Corbynite MPs holding the balance of power. With that, you could see the breakup of the United Kingdom via Indy Ref 2, the SNP would insist on it, and hung parliaments forever as a result of proportional representation, legislation on which the smaller parties would insist. There's going to be a lot of talk about change for this country at this week's Labour Party conference. Change, change, change. That's what they'll be saying, ignoring the fact that we may already have had that change, the change that Britain needs, the transformative new government in the form of our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Labour isn't working, and on Keir Starmer's watch, it never will. That's my view, but what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your feedback in the next few minutes, but let's get the reaction now of my all-star panel. I'm delighted to welcome the former leader of UKIP and Army veteran as well, Henry Bolton, health expert, author and model, Angie Best, and TV personality, model and writer, Precious Muir. Precious, let me start with you. Do you think that Keir Starmer can win a general election?
I feel like he could possibly win because obviously he's selling the story of, he's selling a dream. He's basically telling the public what they want to hear. So it is a possibility. But I feel like he's very ambitious. I feel like he's saying a lot of things and I don't feel like he can follow through on them. I really am quite concerned about what he's saying to the public for him to get those votes.
And what do you mean by that? Do you feel that what he's saying is not authentic? Why do you have concerns?
Well, I mean, he's basically saying that he's going to be able to change the United Kingdom into a superpower before 2030. I don't think that's possible. It's not going to be possible for him to do that because he's not able to control that. Straight away, it's already, for me, a little bit of a fib just to get voters.
OK, and what are your thoughts about his new push for green energy? Because I think we can agree we all want to clean up the planet, and renewables long-term may be a solution, but not right now, not with Vladimir Putin basically kind of, keeping the West under his thumb because of high energy prices.
Yeah, I mean, as a Labour leader, he says that he's going to double the amount of onshore wind power and reindustrialising the country to create a zero-carbon, self-sufficient electricity system by the end of this decade. And I don't think that's possible. I don't think he's going to be able to pull that off at all.
Are there positives to Keir Starmer's leadership, do you think, Precious Muir? I mean, for example, the party seems to have ridden itself of the ghost of anti-Semitism, and they all sang the national anthem at conference today, which was a first.
I mean, I feel like he's definitely got the public on his side, and the Labour Party have always been about the people. So they're going to push for that. And as long as he's going to consider, obviously, the people for him, then that's the way he'll win. I don't personally feel like I would vote for him. That's not the kind of leader I would want. I want somebody who's going to come in and actually fulfil the things that he's telling the public. And I don't believe he's going to be able to do that.
Would you vote for Labour under a different leader, Precious?
I would personally not, no.
OK, well, cards on the table. Let's now speak, if we can, to former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Henry, what do you make of Keir Starmer's first few years as the leader of the opposition? He's fixed a lot of internal problems within the Labour Party, hasn't he?
He has. And, of course, he was elected leader of the Labour Party because he was acceptable, not because he was necessarily the most dynamic, most charismatic leader, but because he was acceptable to enough of the party to get to that position with the view of trying to sort those problems out. And let's be fair, he's to a large degree done that. But he has got no charisma, and a leader cannot succeed without any charisma, without any dynamism, and he's not. You called him the vanilla leader or something, and that sums him up. And then you've got the same problem that we've got with all politicians. And his promise or his pledge that Labour would make the UK a green energy superpower by 2030, it's just not credible. They don't have a strategy, they don't have a plan, and all we get from him, and to be fair, to a large extent from the Conservative Party and all parties, is a wish list of things. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. The public are sick of it. They don't take it credibly. They don't believe it. They may say, well, you might like to do this, but you've got no idea how you're going to do it. And our politicians across the board are so weak and so lacking in experience, unlike generations of, for example, the politicians of the 60s and 70s, who had got a great deal of life experience, generally at sort of fairly senior level and managing sort of what might be called matrix organisations, whether it's in the military or elsewhere. But they had a little bit of nous and a little bit of an idea as to how to develop a strategy and how to connect that strategy and their intention to actually operational change on the ground. Our politicians, and I would just about the entire House of Commons this applies to, are simply incapable of doing it. They don't have that experience. And it's whether it's Labour or whether it's the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, anybody, whatever they say, it's aspirational. They've got no real strategy for doing it, whether it's in transport, healthcare, education, borders, energy. And it's one of the problems that we've got now. Why have we got a problem with energy? It's not simply because of Vladimir Putin. It's because we have left ourselves vulnerable and to people like Putin. We got rid, when we privatised the energy sector, we allowed the energy sector to sell off the strategic reserve storage capacity in the UK. So we don't have the ability to absorb shocks in the price in the market for imported energy, for example. So there are a whole range of things: lack of strategy, lack of strategic acumen, planning acumen, charisma, and actually the ability to stand back from a problem and say, look, all these different dots connect. Transport, we talk about a fifth runway at Heathrow. We talk about HS2, all right, but in isolation of everything else. What about maritime traffic? What about regional airports? What about connecting them with rail, road, and so on? We just don't do it. And that's because we've got a generation of national politicians who, quite frankly, shouldn't be there. And you said earlier that, or we talked about Starmer being the sort of the least worst option. We as a nation, for 2, 3, maybe 4 decades, have become used to the idea, because politicians have sold it to us, that we should be voting tactically. We should be voting for the people or against the people we don't want, rather than demanding that there are candidates put in front of us who actually know what they're doing and have the charisma, the experience, and then the know-how to actually lead. Because if we don't do that, we get mediocre MPs, and then we get a mediocre party leader who then has a mediocre pool from which to fish to fill his cabinet. We end up with a problem all round, and that's what we're seeing in every sector of governance at the moment.
It sounds like it to me. Angie Best, do you think that Keir Starmer has moved the dial for Labour since he became leader of the opposition? After all, Labour are ahead in the polls.
Is Keir Starmer good because Boris is bad, or is Boris bad because Keir Starmer is good? I have a hard time finding one that I like or could trust. I find them all to be very self-serving. And so I try to stay away from politics until I hear somebody who says something that actually makes sense. And that doesn't come from any of them so far. I'm praying that our Liz is going to do what we want her to do. But we shall see.
What are your first impressions of Liz? Because you are a very perceptive person. What does your gut tell you about our new Prime Minister? Because I'm suggesting in the big opinion monologue, Angie Best, that people are crying out for change, and I think it might just have happened with her arrival. I feel like there's been an election and that there's a new government.
Well, people are crying out for change, but the people that are in power are saying the same old shit. Nobody's giving us anything that is going to solve the problems of this country. And it's a shame that we keep, if Conservatives say this, Labour say no. If Conservatives say that, if Labour says this, Conservatives say no. Why can't we come together to help solve the problems instead of fighting each other all the time? We create more problems when we fight. So why can't we all agree to fix this poor little country and the pickle that it's in? I don't get any of them. None of them are worth their salt. Politicians are good for one group of people. Politics is good for one group of people. Politicians, nobody else.
OK, I think fair point. I'm sure we can all agree on that. Why can't politicians be more collegiate? Perhaps that's the way to rebuild our great nation. Coming up next in The Big Question, has Friday's budget gifted Labour the next election? Also later in the hour, is Keir Starmer the right man for a run at the job? We're going to speak to his #1 fan live in the studio, top showbiz and political journalist Nina Mishkov. Plus, my Mark Meets guest is disgraced former Tory MP Jonathan Aitken. He'll talk about life in jail, bankruptcy and becoming a priest. He's got quite a story to tell. Plus, the papers at 10:30. And in the news agenda with my panel, will we ever fix our broken housing market? And do opposites attract? See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Big reaction to my big opinion monologue. For me, Labour isn't working. I don't think that Keir Starmer can win the next election. But what do you think? Mark at gbviews.uk. This from David. Great monologue, Mark. Labour cannot help themselves but go on the attack against businesses and anyone who has worked hard and made a financial success for themselves and their families. No one with aspirations should feel safe under a Labour government. Good evening, Mark. A good monologue again. Starmer, in my opinion, is about as useful as a chocolate teapot in opposition. So if he gets in, we're doomed. Got to be careful about what we wish for. Leading Labour, you could end up with his deputy, who I watched at conference and wasn't impressed with. Even worse than Keir. Of course, that is Angela Rayner. Many of you are emailing to say that she'll be the Labour leader in the next couple of years. However, Kerry says, no, it's Harry. Harry says, Mark, I cannot understand how you can support a party who have got the country in such a mess. Name-calling Keir Starmer the Labour Party is an easy and thoughtless way to cover for a crap government. Well, Harry, I couldn't agree with you more because I have said that I condemn Boris Johnson for those 3 national lockdowns and I will never forgive him. I've spent 2.5 years on the national television and radio airwaves begging Boris to unlock Britain. It didn't happen. He folded to Sage. Starmer always says, we will, but Truss in a short time frame has shown a degree of leadership and says, I will. Babs, a fantastic summary of Starmer's sit-on-the-fence politics. However, you failed to mention his pathetic taking the knee photo shoot. Again, not reading the room. The man is an imposter politician with no idea and certainly no idea what the working classes want. Look, I could get through these hundreds of emails. Love getting them. Do keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time now for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Tonight, the Labour Party conference has kicked off in Liverpool with headlines around new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's budget, all focused on tax cuts for the rich and the scrapping of caps on bankers' bonuses. So with these sorts of policies and headlines, has Friday's budget gifted Labour the next election? Liz Truss is clearly gambling with the economy, a gamble I personally back. But is she also gambling with her political future as well? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former Conservative Minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe, renowned writer and former Labour Minister for Europe, a political legend in his own right, Dennis McShane, and Fleet Street's finest, Express Online's political editor, David Maddox. Dennis, let me start with you. Do you think that Labour have been gifted the next election with this budget?
I must say, up to Thursday, I do a lot of